Welcome to Red Moonlight Channel. Before we start, please subscribe. Higher Lover. Chapter 1, The Widows. Clara had grown accustomed to silence. It filled the rooms of her house like a heavy fog, pressing against her chest, reminding her of what she had lost. Her husband's laughter no longer echoed down the hallway, his voice no longer called her name. The bed was too wide, the evenings too long, and the nights unbearable. She lived in mourning, her heart locked away, her body untouched. Friends urged her to move on, but grief had become her companion, and she feared betraying her husband's memory by opening her heart again. Then Adrian arrived. He was introduced by a friend as someone who understood loneliness. Clara resisted at first, wary of strangers, wary of hope. But Adrian's presence was gentle, his voice unhurried, his eyes steady. He listened without interruption, his words soft, his silences comforting. Their first meeting was simple, a walk in the park. Clara spoke of her husband, of the years they had shared, of the emptiness that followed. Adrian did not try to fix her pain, he simply listened. His hand brushed hers once, and she felt a spark she had not felt in years. Days turned into weeks. They shared meals, spoke of books and music, walked beneath the stars. Clara found herself laughing again, the sound startling in its unfamiliarity. Adrian's gaze lingered on her, warm and patient, as though he saw not just the widow but the woman beneath. One evening, as they sat together on her porch, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine, Adrian reached for her hand. His touch was steady, his fingers warm. Clara's breath caught, her heart racing. She wanted to pull away, but she did not. "You're stronger than you think," Adrian whispered. Clara closed her eyes, tears slipping free. She remembered nights of grief, whispered prayers, trembling hands. She remembered the silence that had consumed her, the loneliness that had defined her. And now, here was Adrian, offering not pity but presence, not judgment but tenderness. The kiss came slowly, almost hesitantly. His lips lingered, warm and patient, as though asking permission. Clara's heart surged, her body trembling. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the moment. The kiss was not passion alone, it was release, it was defiance, it was life. For the first time since her husband's death, Clara felt alive. The days that followed were filled with fragile joy. Adrian's presence became anchor, his laughter balm, his touch reminder of warmth. Clara allowed herself to feel, to hope, to dream. She whispered to herself, "This is not betrayal. This is survival." Behind closed doors, she allowed herself to break down. She wept, she trembled, she confessed her fears. Adrian held her, his arms steady, his voice soothing. He did not erase her grief, he shared it. He did not replace her husband, he reminded her that love could coexist with loss. Their intimacy grew, not rushed but tender. Adrian's hand lingered on her cheek, his lips brushed her forehead, his embrace silenced her fears. Clara discovered that sensuality was not betrayal but renewal, that tenderness was not weakness but strength. She remembered her husband with love, but she allowed herself to love again. She remembered her grief with sorrow, but she allowed herself to feel joy. She remembered her silence, but she allowed herself to speak. Adrian became her companion, her confidant, her lover. He reminded her that life was not over, that love was not gone, that hope was not lost. Clara's journey was not easy. She carried guilt, she carried fear, she carried doubt. But she also carried resilience, defiance, and love. She discovered that opening her heart was not betrayal but survival, not weakness but strength, not surrender but triumph. The widow's silence had been broken. Chapter 2, The Career Woman's. The first time I met Helena, she was surrounded by the hum of her office. Phones rang, assistants rushed past, and her desk was a fortress of files and glowing screens. She was a woman carved from ambition, sharp suits, sharper words, and a gaze that could silence a room. Yet beneath the polished exterior, I sensed a quiet exhaustion, a loneliness she had trained herself to ignore. She greeted me with a brisk handshake, her eyes already darting back to her computer. "I don't have much time," she said. I smiled, unhurried. "Then let's make the time count." Her lips pressed into a line, but I caught the flicker of curiosity. Helena's life was a symphony of deadlines and boardrooms. She had built her empire brick by brick, sacrificing evenings, friendships, and love. Success was her armor, but it had also become her prison. She confessed it one evening, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted. "If I pause, everything falls apart. But sometimes, I wonder if I've already lost something more important." Her words lingered in the air, fragile and raw. I saw the woman behind the CEO, the one who longed for tenderness, for connection, for romance that wasn't scheduled between meetings. I didn't challenge her ambition, I respected it. But I offered her something she had forgotten, presence. When we met, I left my phone behind. I listened, not to her strategies, but to her silences. I noticed the way her shoulders relaxed when she laughed, the way her eyes softened when she spoke of her childhood, the way her hand lingered on her wine glass when she admitted she was tired of being strong all the time. One evening, I suggested a walk. No agenda, no deadlines, just the city lights and the rhythm of footsteps. She hesitated, then agreed. As we strolled, her voice slowed, her words less guarded. She told me about the first deal she ever closed, the thrill of victory, the loneliness of celebration. "You're always surrounded by people," I said gently, "but you sound alone." Her silence was answer enough. It was during one of those walks that I reached for her hand. She stiffened at first, instinctively resisting, but then her fingers curled around mine. The contact was simple, yet it carried weight. For Helena, touch was rare, intimacy rarer. She glanced at me, her eyes searching. "You make it seem easy," she whispered. "Because it is," I replied. "Love doesn't need a strategy." Her laugh was soft, almost incredulous. But she didn't let go. Dinner at her apartment was the moment everything shifted. She had invited me reluctantly, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "I don't usually do this," she confessed as she poured wine. Her home was elegant but impersonal, art chosen for prestige, furniture arranged for efficiency. Yet as the evening unfolded, warmth seeped into the space. We cooked together, clumsy and laughing, her hair falling loose from its usual tight bun. When the meal was finished, she sat across from me, her gaze steady. "I don't know how to balance this," she admitted. "Ambition and whatever this is." I leaned closer, my voice low. "You don't have to choose. You can have both. Success doesn't mean solitude." Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time, she looked not like a CEO but like a woman longing to be seen. It happened naturally. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, my fingers lingering against her cheek. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch. Our lips met, tentative at first, then deepening with unspoken need. The kiss was not rushed, it was patient, tender, sensual. It carried the weight of years she had denied herself, the release of walls she had built too high. Her hands gripped mine, her breath quickened, her body trembled. When we parted, she whispered, "I'd forgotten what this felt like." I smiled. "Now you remember." In the weeks that followed, Helena began to change. She still commanded boardrooms, still chased ambition, but she also allowed herself moments of softness. She laughed more, lingered longer, and let herself be kissed without guilt. Her dilemma was not erased, but it was resolved in balance. She discovered that romance was not weakness, that tenderness did not diminish strength, that love could coexist with ambition. One evening, as we watched the city lights from her balcony, she turned to me, her voice steady. "You've given me something I didn't know I needed." I kissed her hand, my voice just as steady. "You gave it to yourself. I only reminded you." Chapter 3, The Single Mother's Fear. Her name was Mariah. I first saw her at a community gathering, standing slightly apart from the crowd, her young daughter clinging to her hand. There was a quiet strength in her posture, but also a hesitation in her eyes, the look of someone who had learned to carry burdens alone. When we spoke, her words were careful, measured. "I don't usually meet people like this," she admitted. "My life is my child. Everything else feels secondary." I understood. Many of the women I met carried dilemmas, but Mariah's was different. She feared rejection, not for herself, but for the child who defined her world. Mariah had built her life around responsibility. She worked long hours, managed bills, and raised her daughter with fierce devotion. Yet beneath that devotion lay insecurity. She worried that no man would accept her fully, that her child would be seen as baggage rather than blessing. "I can't risk heartbreak," she confessed one evening. "Not for me, not for her. If someone leaves, it won't just be me who suffers." Her fear was palpable, but so was her longing. She wanted companionship, tenderness, romance, but she had convinced herself it was impossible. I decided to introduce Mariah to my circle of friends. They were a diverse group: teachers, artisans, mechanics, nurses, people who understood resilience. I wanted her to see that love and respect were not reserved for the privileged, that her life as a single mother was not a limitation but a testament to strength. At a small dinner gathering, I highlighted her presence. "This is Mariah," I said warmly. "She's one of the strongest women I've met. She raises her daughter with grace and works harder than anyone I know." My friends welcomed her, not with pity but with admiration. They asked about her work, her child, her dreams. Mariah's eyes widened at the genuine interest, her shoulders relaxing as laughter filled the room. Later, one of my friends, a carpenter, said quietly to her, "Raising a child alone is harder than any job I've ever done. You deserve respect." I saw the way her eyes shimmered, the way her fear softened. For the first time, she felt seen not as a burdened mother, but as a woman worthy of admiration. Mariah asked me once, "Why do you do this? Why be a hired lover?" I answered honestly. "Because love is essential. Just like the work of a builder, a nurse, or a teacher. People think romance is luxury, but it's survival. We all need connection, tenderness, intimacy. My profession is no less essential than any blue-collar job. It's about giving people what they've been denied, the chance to feel alive again." She listened, her gaze steady. "I never thought of it that way," she whispered. Our time together grew into quiet rituals. Walks in the park with her daughter, dinners where she allowed herself to laugh, evenings where she spoke of her fears. I listened, not to fix her, but to remind her she was not alone. One evening, after her daughter had gone to bed, we sat on her porch. The night was cool, the stars scattered across the sky. Mariah's voice trembled as she said, "I don't know if I can let myself feel this. What if it hurts her?" I reached for her hand, steady and warm. "Your daughter will see you happy. That's not hurt, that's hope." Her breath caught, her eyes shimmering. It happened gently. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, my fingers lingering against her cheek. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch. Our lips met, tentative at first, then deepening with unspoken need. The kiss was not just romance, it was reassurance. It told her she was worthy, that her fears could be silenced, that love could coexist with responsibility. When we parted, she whispered, "I thought I had to choose her or me. But maybe I don't." I smiled. "You don't. Love doesn't take away, it adds." In the weeks that followed, Mariah began to change. She still devoted herself to her daughter, but she also allowed herself moments of softness. She laughed more, lingered longer, and let herself be kissed without guilt. Her dilemma was not erased, but it was resolved in balance. She discovered that romance was not betrayal of motherhood, but enrichment of it. She realized that her daughter's future was brighter when she herself was happy. At another gathering with my friends, Mariah spoke with confidence, her laughter ringing clear. She was no longer the hesitant woman standing apart, she was part of the circle, admired and respected. Later that night, she turned to me, her voice steady. "You've given me something I didn't think I deserved." I kissed her hand, my voice just as steady. "You always deserved it. You just needed to believe it." From my perspective, Mariah's transformation was profound. She had been a woman defined by fear, imprisoned by responsibility. But she learned to open her heart, to rediscover romance, to embrace sensuality without guilt. Her story was not about choosing between motherhood and love, it was about realizing she deserved both. And as her hired lover, I was not her savior, but her mirror, reflecting back the woman she had always been, strong, devoted, and capable of tenderness. The single mother's fear was no longer a barrier. It was a lesson, a journey, a rediscovery of love. Chapter 4: I the Artists. The studio had once been alive with color. Isabel remembered mornings when sunlight poured through the tall windows, catching the dust motes that danced above canvases, and evenings when laughter from her students echoed against the walls. But now, the silence was heavy. Brushes lay unused, paints dried in their tubes, and her canvases stared back at her, blank, accusing. She was an artist without a voice. Her students noticed. They whispered about her hesitation, her unfinished work, the way her gaze lingered on empty space. Isabel felt their concern, but she could not explain the weight pressing against her chest. Inspiration had fled, leaving her hollow. It was then she decided to hire Adrian. Adrian entered the studio with a calm presence, his movements unhurried, his smile warm. Isabel introduced him to her students as their new model. She hoped his presence would stir something within her, break the silence that had consumed her art. He greeted each student with ease, shaking hands, asking names, listening to their stories. His voice carried humor, his laughter softened the tension in the room. Isabel watched as her students relaxed, their sketches flowing more freely, their eyes bright with curiosity. For the first time in months, the studio felt alive again. Adrian posed simply at first, seated, standing, walking. Isabel sketched him, her hand trembling, her lines hesitant. Yet as she observed his posture, his expressions, she felt a spark. His presence was not just physical, it was emotional. He carried himself with vulnerability, with openness, with trust. Her students noticed too. They sketched with renewed energy, their pencils moving swiftly, their eyes focused. Adrian encouraged them, offering gentle words, reminding them that art was not perfection but discovery. Isabel felt her block begin to dissolve. One afternoon, Adrian in nudity approached her. "You can paint me," he said. "Not just on canvas, but here. Let me be your canvas." Isabel hesitated. The idea was unconventional, intimate. But Adrian's gaze was steady, his voice reassuring. She agreed. She dipped her brush into crimson, her hand trembling as she approached his arm. The first stroke was hesitant, a line of red across his naked skin. Isabel felt her heart race, her block dissolve. She painted swirls of blue, arcs of gold, patterns that flowed with his breath. Adrian smiled softly. "See? Art is alive again." Her tears blurred her vision. For the first time in months, she felt passion surge through her. It was not just paint, it was intimacy, trust, and rediscovery. Isabel painted directly on Adrian's body, sketches inspired by the vulnerability and beauty of the moment. The art was not as technique but as connection, not as perfection but as expression. The studio was alive with energy, with discovery, with passion. Isabel felt her block shatter, her creativity flow freely. In the days that followed, Isabel painted with abandon. She sketched Adrian in countless poses, painted colors across his skin, created canvases that pulsed with life. Her students thrived, inspired by her rediscovery, their own art blossoming. Adrian's presence was not just physical, it was emotional, sensual, intimate. He reminded her that art was not about control but about surrender, not about perfection but about vulnerability. Isabel realized that her art had never been lost, it had been waiting for her to embrace intimacy, trust, and the courage to see beauty in vulnerability. One evening, as the studio emptied and the light faded, Isabel sat with Adrian as he looked at her latest works. Her voice trembled as she said, "You've given me back my art." Adrian shook his head gently. "You gave it to yourself. I only reminded you." She smiled, tears slipping free. For the first time in months, she felt alive, not just as an artist, but as a woman. Chapter 5, The Heiress's Cage. Elena was born into wealth, but wealth had never felt like freedom. Her family's estate was vast, their name respected, their influence undeniable. Yet for Elena, every corridor of the mansion was a cage. Decisions were made for her, what to wear, who to meet, whom to marry. Love was not a choice, it was a transaction. Her heart, however, had betrayed those expectations. She had fallen for Raphael, a man of modest means, a scholar with dreams but no fortune. Their love was tender, genuine, but forbidden. Her family dismissed him as unsuitable, unworthy of their lineage. Desperate, Elena turned to Adrian. She met him in the garden, her voice trembling but determined. "Marry me," she said. "If you stand beside me, my family will relent. They will see me with a man of stature, of presence. They will stop pressing me into their chosen match." Adrian studied her, his gaze steady. He understood her desperation, her longing for escape. But he also saw the truth, her heart belonged to Raphael, not to him. "Elena," he said softly, "you don't need me as a husband. You need me as an ally. Let me help you find freedom, not another cage." Her eyes shimmered with tears. But how? Adrian devised a strategy. He would play the role of suitor, presenting himself to Elena's family with dignity and charm. He would show them that Elena was capable of choosing, that she was not a pawn in their game. But behind the performance, he would guide them toward acceptance of Raphael. At dinners, Adrian spoke eloquently, praising Elena's independence, her intelligence, her strength. He reminded her family that love was not weakness but resilience, that marriage was not transaction but partnership. His words unsettled them, but they listened. Meanwhile, Raphael remained in the shadows, waiting, hoping. Adrian reassured him. "Trust me. This is not about me taking her. It's about giving her back to you." One evening, Elena's father confronted Adrian. "You are not of our world. Why should we allow you to marry her?" Adrian smiled calmly. "Because I don't intend to marry her. I intend to help her marry the man she loves." The room fell silent. Elena's family stared, shocked. Adrian continued, his voice steady. "You cage her with expectations, but cages break. Raphael may not have wealth, but he has integrity. He loves her not for her name, but for her soul. That is worth more than fortune." Elena's mother whispered, "But society will judge." Adrian replied, "Society admires courage. Let them judge, and let Elena stand taller for it." It was not immediate, but Adrian's words planted seeds. Elena's family began to see Raphael differently, not as a threat, but as a man who truly cherished her. They saw Elena's resolve, her refusal to be caged. They saw Adrian's dignity, his refusal to exploit her desperation. Gradually, resistance softened. Her father, once rigid, admitted, "Perhaps love is not weakness. Perhaps it is strength." Elena wept when she heard those words. For the first time, the cage door opened. Months later, Elena and Raphael stood together, hand in hand, before family and friends. The ceremony was simple, but the joy was profound. Adrian attended, his presence quiet but essential. He had been the bridge, the ally, the escape. As Elena exchanged vows, she glanced at Adrian, her eyes filled with gratitude. He nodded, his smile gentle. She was free, not because he had married her, but because he had helped her marry the man she loved. Elena's story was not about wealth or status, it was about freedom. She had been trapped in a cage of expectations, but Adrian helped her break free. He refused to become another cage, choosing instead to be her ally, her escape, her advocate. Her family learned that love was not weakness but resilience, not transaction but truth. Raphael became part of their world, not because of wealth, but because of courage. And Adrian walked away, not as husband, but as friend, as proof that love is strongest when it is chosen freely. Chapter 6, The Teacher. Margaret had always lived by rules. As a teacher, she believed in discipline, in boundaries, in the moral compass that guided her students. She taught literature with passion, ethics with conviction, and carried herself as a model of integrity. But beneath the surface, she was weary. At 37, she had never married. Suitors had come and gone, but her devotion to propriety had kept her from stepping outside the box she had built for herself. She believed romance outside marriage was unethical, a betrayal of the values she taught. Yet loneliness gnawed at her, and the silence of her evenings grew heavier with each passing year. Her dilemma was sharp, she longed for intimacy, but her ethics forbade it. She wanted to be seen, to be loved, but she feared hypocrisy. Margaret's decision to hire Adrian was not impulsive. She had heard of him, his reputation for helping women confront dilemmas, his ability to blend tenderness with respect. She told herself it was not romance she sought, but escape. Escape from the cage of ethics, escape from the silence that had consumed her. When Adrian arrived, she greeted him with formality, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "I am a teacher," she said. "I cannot betray my values. But I need something. I need to feel alive again." Adrian listened, his gaze calm. "You don't need betrayal," he replied. "You need permission to be human, to feel, to exist beyond rules. Let me help you find that." Margaret's struggle was profound. She believed that intimacy outside marriage was wrong, yet she also believed that denying herself love was a form of self-harm. She taught her students about courage, about truth, about living authentically. Yet she herself lived in silence, hiding her vulnerability behind ethics. Her voice trembled as she confessed, "I tell my students to be brave, but I am not. I tell them to live fully, but I do not. I am trapped in my own lessons." Adrian's reply was gentle. "Ethics are not chains. They are guides. But guides must serve life, not imprison it. You are not betraying your values by seeking love, you are honoring them by living truthfully." Margaret hired Adrian not for romance, but for companionship. They met in her home, shared tea, spoke of books and philosophy. Adrian listened to her fears, her doubts, her longing. He reminded her that vulnerability was not weakness, that intimacy was not betrayal, that love was not unethical. One evening, he asked, "What do you fear most?" She whispered, "That my students will see me as a hypocrite." Adrian shook his head. "They will see you as human. And humanity is the greatest lesson you can teach." Margaret's transformation began with small steps. She allowed herself to laugh, to linger, to feel. Adrian's presence reminded her that ethics were not walls but pathways. She realized that her fear was not of betrayal, but of judgment. One evening, as they sat together, Adrian reached for her hand. His touch was steady, his gaze gentle. Margaret's breath caught, her heart racing. She wanted to pull away, but she did not. "You are allowed to be seen," Adrian whispered. Her tears fell freely. For the first time, she felt the weight of her cage lift. Their companionship grew into intimacy, not rushed, not reckless, but tender. Adrian kissed her hand, brushed her cheek, held her when she wept. Margaret discovered that sensuality was not betrayal but renewal, that tenderness was not weakness but strength. She confessed, "I thought ethics meant denial. But perhaps they mean honesty. And honesty tells me I need this." Adrian smiled. "Then you are living your ethics, not breaking them." Margaret's dilemma was not erased, but it was resolved in balance. She discovered that being a teacher did not mean denying her self-love. She told her students, ethics are not about denying life. They are about living it with integrity. They listened, inspired by her honesty, unaware of the private journey that had brought her to those words. Adrian's role was not to break her ethics, but to help her escape the box she had built. He reminded her that love was not unethical, that vulnerability was not betrayal, that humanity was the greatest lesson of all. Chapter 7: The Traveler. Sophia had never stayed in one place for long. Her life was a string of airports, train stations, and temporary homes. She collected stamps in her passport the way others collected photographs, each destination a fleeting chapter. To outsiders, she seemed free, untethered, adventurous, alive. But beneath the surface, Sophia carried a quiet loneliness. Her heart had grown cautious. Every time someone tried to love her, she tested them. She built elaborate trials, questions, challenges, impossible standards. No one ever passed. She told herself it was because they weren't strong enough, but deep down, she feared that love itself was too fragile to survive her restless spirit. When she hired Adrian, she did not ask for romance. She asked for proof. Proof that someone could endure her tests, proof that love could survive her nomadic life. Adrian met her in a cafe tucked between cobblestone streets. She arrived late, her hair wind-blown, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "You know," she said, "no one has ever passed my tests. I don't believe love is real unless it survives trial." Adrian smiled calmly. "Then perhaps the problem isn't love. Perhaps it's the tests." Her brows furrowed. "Without tests, how do I know it's true?" "You don't," Adrian replied. "You feel it. Love isn't proven, it's lived." Sophia leaned back, skeptical. But something in his voice unsettled her. Sophia began as she always did, with challenges. She asked Adrian impossible questions. Would you follow me across continents? Would you endure silence for months? Would you love me if I disappeared tomorrow? Adrian answered not with promises, but with presence. "I don't need to prove love through hypotheticals," he said. "I need to show it in moments. Right here, right now." She frowned. "That's too easy." "It's the hardest thing," Adrian countered. "To love without conditions, without tests, without guarantees." Her silence was heavy, her mind racing. Adrian agreed to travel with her for a time. They moved from city to city, exploring markets, museums, and quiet streets. Sophia watched him closely, waiting for him to falter, waiting for him to fail her unspoken trials. But Adrian did not falter. He laughed with her, listened to her, walked beside her. He did not try to prove himself, he simply lived. His presence was steady, his affection unhurried, his gaze unyielding. Sophia began to notice something strange. Her tests no longer mattered. She found herself enjoying the moments, the taste of coffee in Paris, the sound of rain in Rome, the warmth of his hand in Prague. One evening, as they sat on a balcony overlooking the sea, Sophia confronted him. "Why don't you try to pass my tests? Everyone else has." Adrian's voice was calm. "Because love isn't about passing. It's about being. If you keep testing, you'll never feel it. You'll only measure it, and love measured is love lost." Her breath caught. His words pierced her defenses. She realized that her tests had been cages, not proofs. She had trapped herself in fear, denying herself the very love she longed for. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't know how to stop." Adrian reached for her hand, steady and warm. "Then let me show you. Stop testing. Start living." Sophia allowed herself to soften. She stopped asking questions, stopped setting trials. She let herself laugh, let herself linger, let herself feel. Adrian's presence became anchor, his touch reminder of warmth, his gaze reminder of trust. Their intimacy grew, not rushed, not forced, but tender. Adrian kissed her forehead, brushed her cheek, held her when she trembled. Sophia discovered that love was not proven by endurance, but by vulnerability. She whispered one evening, "I thought love had to survive tests. But maybe it just has to survive me." Adrian smiled. "And it will, if you let it." Sophia's dilemma was not erased, but it was resolved in balance. She discovered that love was not about trials, but about trust. She realized that her nomadic life did not prevent love, it enriched it. Home was not a place, it was a person. Adrian's role was not to pass her tests, but to dismantle them. He reminded her that love was not proven, but lived. He showed her that freedom did not mean solitude, that adventure did not mean loneliness, that home could be found in another's arms. Sophia wept when she realized it. For the first time, she felt free not because she had escaped, but because she had embraced. Chapter 8, The Divorcee. Her name was Lillian. She carried herself with elegance, but her eyes betrayed the weight of betrayal. Divorce had scarred her, leaving her wary of affection, suspicious of tenderness, and doubtful of trust. When she hired me, she was clear, "I don't want romance. I want to learn if trust is possible again." I understood. Betrayal leaves wounds deeper than heartbreak, it corrodes faith. Lillian's dilemma was not about love itself, but about whether she could ever believe in it again. She told me her story in fragments. A marriage built on promises, a husband who whispered devotion, and then the discovery of lies. The betrayal was not just infidelity, it was deception woven into years of companionship. She had given everything, and in return, she had been broken. "I don't believe words anymore," she confessed. "I don't believe gestures. Everything feels like performance." Her voice trembled, but her resolve was strong. She had built walls around herself, walls that kept pain out but also kept love away. I knew I could not dismantle her walls with declarations. Words were fragile to her, promises meaningless. What she needed was presence, consistency, patience, and honesty. So I began simply. I showed up when I said I would. I listened without interruption. I respected her boundaries. I reminded her, not with speeches, but with actions, that trust is built in moments, not in grand gestures. One evening, I told her, trust isn't about believing everything. It's about believing enough to take one step forward. Just one step. She looked at me, skeptical, but I saw the flicker of hope. Lillian tested me, though not with deliberate trials like Sophia had. Her tests were subtle, hesitations, silences, questions asked not for answers but for reassurance. "Why are you here?" she asked once. "Because you asked me to be," I replied. "And if I push you away? Then I'll respect that. But I'll still believe you deserve trust." Her doubt was heavy, but I did not fight it. I let it exist, knowing that trust is not born from denial but from acceptance. It was during a walk in the park that the shift began. Lillian spoke of her fear, that she would never be able to trust anyone again, that betrayal had defined her forever. I stopped, turned to her, and said, "Betrayal defines him, not you. Your story doesn't end with his lies. It continues with your courage." Her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "But what if I'm fooled again?" I held her gaze. "Then you'll survive again. Because trust isn't about guarantees, it's about courage. And you have more courage than you know." Gradually, Lillian allowed herself to soften. She let me hold her hand, let me sit beside her in silence, let me kiss her forehead when words failed. Our intimacy was not rushed, not forced, but tender. She confessed one evening, "I don't know if I can ever love again." I smiled gently. "You don't have to decide that now. Just trust this moment. That's enough." Her tears fell freely, but her smile was real. Lillian's doubt was not erased, but it was transformed. She discovered that trust was not about certainty, but about courage. She realized that betrayal had scarred her, but it had not destroyed her. She understood that trust could be rebuilt, not through promises, but through presence. She told me one evening, "You've shown me that trust isn't about believing everything, it's about believing enough. And I think I can believe again. I kissed her hand, my voice steady. Then you've already won. Chapter 9, The Dreamer. I had always lived in stories. My childhood was filled with films where love arrived like a thunderstorm, grand gestures, sweeping music, kisses in the rain. I believed in those moments, believed they were the only proof of love. Reality, however, was quieter. Bills, deadlines, responsibilities, these became my companions. I postponed love, telling myself it would come later, when the timing was perfect, when the fantasy matched the script in my head. But later stretched into years. I was 35 now, still waiting for the cinematic moment that never arrived. My friends married, had children, built lives. I built dreams. When I hired Adrian, I told him plainly, I want love like the movies. Can you give me that? Adrian smiled, his voice calm. I can give you love. But not like the movies. Like life. I frowned. Life is ordinary. I want extraordinary. He leaned closer. Extraordinary isn't in the script. It's in the moments you stop waiting and start living. His words unsettled me. I wanted roses, candlelight, declarations. He offered presents, patience, reality. I insisted we act out my fantasies. I asked him to stand beneath the rain, to hold me as though we were in a film. He obliged, his arms steady, his gaze warm. But as the rain soaked us, I realized something strange, the moment felt hollow. The music wasn't swelling, the world wasn't watching. It was just us, shivering, laughing awkwardly. See? Adrian said gently. It's not the rain that makes love. It's the warmth in your arms. I wanted to argue, but his words lingered. Next, I asked for the candlelit dinner. Adrian set the table, lit candles, poured wine. It was beautiful, cinematic. Yet as we sat across from each other, I noticed the silence. In movies, dialogue sparkles. In reality, conversation falters, laughter fills gaps, pauses stretch. Adrian reached for my hand. This isn't a scene. It's a moment. And moments don't need scripts. I felt my heart stir. Perhaps reality was not as hollow as I feared. I asked for the balcony confession, the lover declaring eternal devotion beneath the stars. Adrian stood beside me, the city lights glowing below. I waited for his speech, the words that would prove love. Instead, he said simply, I'm here. I frowned. That's all? He nodded. That's everything. Tears filled my eyes. I realized then that my fantasies had been cages, not dreams. I had postponed love, waiting for perfection, but perfection was not real. Presence was. Adrian confronted me one evening. You've delayed love because you've demanded it be fantasy. But love isn't fantasy, it's reality. And reality is enough. I whispered, but what if reality disappoints? He held my gaze. Then you learn. And you grow. And you love again. Fantasy never teaches you that. Only reality does. His words pierced me. I realized that my delay had not been practicality, it had been fear. Fear that reality could not match fantasy. Fear that love would not be extraordinary. Gradually, I allowed myself to soften. I stopped demanding scenes, stopped scripting moments. I let myself laugh, let myself linger, let myself feel. Adrian's presence became anchor, his touch reminder of warmth, his gaze reminder of trust. One evening, as we sat together, I whispered, I thought love had to be like the movies. But maybe it just has to be like this. Adrian smiled. Exactly. Love isn't delayed, it's lived. I realized that my delay had been fear, but fear could be silenced. I understood that love was not postponed, it was present, waiting for me to embrace it. Adrian's role was not to act out my fantasies, but to dismantle them. He reminded me that love was not proven by scenes, but by moments. He showed me that reality was not ordinary, it was extraordinary in its honesty. I wept when I realized it. Chapter 10, The Survivor. Her name was Miriam. She had endured storms that would have broken most people: loss, poverty, betrayal, illness. Each hardship had carved lines into her face, but her spirit remained unbroken. She was a survivor, though survival had come at a cost. Joy felt foreign, tenderness felt dangerous, and love seemed like a luxury she could not afford. When she hired me, her words were steady but her eyes trembled. "I don't want romance," she said. "I want to remember what joy feels like. I want to know if tenderness is still possible." I understood. Survival teaches resilience, but it often silences softness. Miriam's dilemma was not about strength, she had plenty of that. It was about rediscovering gentleness, allowing herself to feel joy without fear. We met in her small apartment, walls lined with books and photographs of places she had once dreamed of visiting. She greeted me with caution, her posture defensive, her voice measured. "I've lived through too much," she confessed. "Tenderness feels like weakness. Joy feels like betrayal of all I've endured." I listened, my presence unhurried. "Tenderness isn't weakness," I said softly. "It's strength in another form. And joy isn't betrayal, it's survival's reward." Her silence was heavy, but I saw the flicker of hope. Miriam loved music. She told me that during her hardest nights, she sang quietly to herself, songs of resilience, songs that reminded her she was still alive. But she had stopped singing, convinced that joy was no longer hers to claim. I asked her to sing for me. She resisted at first, embarrassed, but eventually her voice rose, fragile, trembling, but beautiful. The song was not polished, but it carried the weight of her journey. When she finished, tears filled her eyes. "I haven't sung in years," she whispered. I smiled. "Then let this be your survivor's song. Not of hardship, but of joy." I did not rush her. I offered presence, patience, and small gestures of tenderness. I cooked meals with her, walked with her, listened to her stories. I reminded her that joy was not grand, it was found in laughter, in warmth, in moments of connection. One evening, I reached for her hand. She stiffened, instinctively resisting, but then her fingers curled around mine. Her breath caught, her eyes shimmering. "You are allowed to be held," I whispered. Her tears fell freely. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel tenderness without fear. Miriam's transformation began with laughter. It was small at first, a chuckle at a joke, a smile at a memory. But gradually, it grew. She laughed freely, her voice filling the room, her spirit lightening. She confessed one evening, "I thought joy was gone forever. But maybe it was just waiting." I nodded. Joy doesn't disappear. It waits for courage. And you have courage. Her eyes shimmered with gratitude. Our companionship grew into intimacy, not rushed, not forced, but tender. I kissed her forehead, brushed her cheek, held her when she trembled. Miriam discovered that sensuality was not betrayal of survival, but celebration of it. She whispered one evening, "I thought tenderness would break me. But it heals me." I smiled. That's the survivor's song. Not silence, but joy. Miriam's dilemma was not erased, but it was resolved in balance. She discovered that survival was not just endurance, it was also joy. She realized that hardship had scarred her, but it had not destroyed her. She understood that tenderness was not weakness, but strength in another form. She told me one evening, "You've shown me that survival isn't just about living, it's about feeling. And I think I can feel again." I kissed her hand, my voice steady. "Then you've already won." Miriam's story was profound. She had been a woman defined by hardship, imprisoned by survival. But she learned to open her heart, to rediscover joy, to embrace tenderness without fear. Her story was not about forgetting hardship, it was about surviving it. And I, as her hired companion, was not her savior but her mirror, reflecting back the woman she had always been, strong, courageous, and capable of joy.